John Calipari from the University of Kentucky. It's been a nice ride. It's been a great ride, but it is officially time to divorce. I'm your host, Josh Burton. You know me well, and you know my man to the right of me, Mr. Peyton Burton. We're the co-founders and co-owners of Everything College Basketball. And there's no secret that if you followed us for the last 6 years, I'm a diehard Kentucky Wildcat fan. He is a diehard University of Louisville and University of Kansas University, fan. And we're going to talk about today in this video. I'm going to break my silence, and we'll get into all of it. It is time to divorce John Calipari from the University of Kentucky. Peyton, before we get into anything here, just kind of your initial synopsis of all this.
If Cal would have retired, let's just play hypothetical purposes here. If he would have won the national championship in 2015 and capped off the first perfect season since Indiana did it in '76, that would have been the perfect swan song. Because if he would have left after that and ended up retiring, there might be people can honestly make the debate that he might have been the greatest coach to ever come to Kentucky if you would have capped it off there, because he had a hell of like the first 7-6 years of his career at Kentucky when he hopped in there in 2009, 2010, and then that run till 2010 to 2016 was like so well done. I mean, he was on the top of his game. Swaggy Cal was as the top it's ever been. He was getting the best recruits. Like Drake was coming to Big Blue Madnesses, and you're selling out arenas, and you had the number one attendance, and Big Blue Nation was all wild up. They were passionate. They were winning a lot of ball games, winning SEC championships, winning SEC tournament championships, constant one seeds. Had that one fall in 2013 when they missed the NCAA tournament. But besides that, I mean, it was just all up here. They won so many ball games, and the fans were just so happy. And these last 5-6 years, it has slowly went downhill, and now it's towards the complete bottom. And I never thought it was going to happen. People kept on clamoring for it to happen. But I thought if it was going to happen, I thought it was going to be something like he cheated or some BS like outside of like coaching. This is all on him. And I'll let you take it away from here.
Yeah, and you're right. And we're going to dissect and break this down as best as we can in this video right now. But let's start. And I mentioned a little bit, I alluded to my silence, because last night we were actually recording this late in the evening on Friday, towards the end of completely day one of the NCAA tournament. Well, in night one, last night on Thursday, Kentucky is a 3 seed, laid another egg. There's no other way to describe it, to 14 seed little old Oakland, the Golden Grizzlies from the Horizon League. Greg Kampe, 40th year. He gets a big win. Congratulations, Oakland. We're going to break all that down in full detail, the game and all that, on Monday's show as we recap the first week in the NCAA tournament. We're not here to discuss that tonight, though. It is disappointing because they lose, and of course, I'm upset. And the vitriol may is a little strong word, but the constant barrage of just, you know me, like in my younger days, Peyton, you know me, I would have stirred the pot and I would have talked all the shit possible, but I don't anymore because 1, I'm older, 2, I'm in the media, and 3, especially with my friends, I mean, I'm not above poking jabs and having fun. I'm not. Like, we do it all the time. But there's a time and a place, and sometimes it's unnecessary to get the amount that I think as Kentucky fans, I don't know of too many other fan bases that honestly get it as bad as we do, especially in the state of Indiana. And I'm not here to, whine and complain about it. I'm just stating facts for you. So I kept just nonstop on simple posts too. Just, hey man, I'm excited for this game. I'm happy, but I'm nervous because of recent history. And then the constant, what happened? And the kitty cat and da-da-da. And I'm just like, all right, we're going to take a break. We're just going to completely shut the world out. And unfortunately, Peyton, that was you too. And I'll tell you on this video, I apologize for you because you didn't do nothing wrong. But I needed to separate myself that. Now, you're going to ask watching this video, and you may even laugh when I describe all this, why, as a grown man, would a loss bother you so bad? And you probably have some good points. If you're laughing at me right now, okay, I can't blame you. But listen to me when I say this. The University of Kentucky basketball, in particular, I've told this story before how I believe basketball in general saved my life. It kept me in school doing what I needed to do to graduate because I loved the game so much in high school. It got me into coaching. It gave me a path in life. And we're in the media because of this beautiful sport. But in a different realm of that, or I guess like a subplot to that, the University of Kentucky basketball, from the time I was a little boy, and I mean little, I'm talking like 4 or 5 years old, first memories really, has been there. They've been there. And for those who maybe have heard me tell this or don't know this, like I can remember, if you go back to the old Sega games, if you remember NBA Jam was popular in like 93, 94, all that. Well, they had a college version of that called College Slam. My dad, our dad, and I would play that a lot. And he would be Indiana. You want to take a guess who I was? That's right. It was the University of Kentucky. All the time. I love the Cats. And the Kentucky basketball, for as crazy as it is, and maybe it says something about my psychological being, that I attach my emotions, my happy and sadness, to a group of young men and coaches that don't know who the hell I am, more than likely. But it goes back deeper in my psychology of my brain because they've been there. They've always been there. Through some of the worst times in my life, personal life, they were there. I could turn on a game from November to March, and if we won for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, I could feel like I was on top of the world, but yet the world around me was crumbling. If we lost, well, then I rode that emotional roller coaster. But through relationships, through personal trauma, through a lot, the University of Kentucky was there, and they're always going to be there. As a matter of fact, if you're watching this video, they're on my skin. Why? Because they're there. They're with me forever. So when you tell me that this is, it's just a game, in theory, you're right. You're right. And it's probably something psychologically it's messed up with me. But they're there. And I love them. And so last night I dealt with, and we'll get into this history and why Cal, we'll turn it back to it. But a little background here. The last 4 years has not been the Kentucky basketball that I love. That's given me that high that no matter what's going on through COVID when we're all struggling, or through personal issues where I have all these things going on and I feel like my life's crumbling, I couldn't turn to them to give me that temporary joy that I'm used to getting from them. And last night, the loss to Oakland was a culmination of just another low point when we needed them the most. So we're going to get into it, but I wanted to give you a little background. And again, if you laugh at me or anything else, I don't blame you. Because again, it's probably something messed up in my brain that I allow a group every year of 18 to 24-year-olds or whatever, 23, 22, to affect my happiness like that for temporary beings. But the reality is I'm a Wildcat from the birth. Our grandmother and dad from the state of Kentucky. And from that moment on, I've always been a Wildcat. From the time I came on this earth until the time I leave this earth. So this is why it matters. Again, it's on my skin for the rest of my life. This is why it matters. So with that being said, Peyton, I'm going to let you open up, kind of be the moderator of this thing. And we're going to break down exactly why it is time for the most legendary coaches, most infamous coaches, whether you love him or hate him, and especially in the great history of the greatest tradition in college basketball, the best program all time in college basketball. That's not me being just fanboy. That's facts. You go look up Sports Illustrated articles. You can go ask Jay Billis, Seth Greenberg, whoever you want to ask. They will tell you University of Kentucky is the greatest tradition in college basketball. But why is time that we move on from this legendary coach? Peyton, I will let you. The floor is yours.
Lil Wayne said in a song dedicated to the late great Black Mamba Kobe Bryant, "It's more than a game, it's a passion." And I would believe those words strongly. And I'm not going to talk shit about anybody or anything because it's not the time or the place to do so. And to be honest, I just really don't care and don't really have the energy to do that currently right now in this YouTube video. But what I will say is, I hope if you don't like how what he just said or blah 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 or you making fun of him, that's fine. I just hope you find some passion in your life that you can be passionate about, and maybe just slightly you'll understand, because I've done stuff when I was little. I used to cry when Kentucky would beat Louisville, actually get emotional. And I was a kid, but I've also get pissed off when DeAndre hit a game winner against Louisville like 6 years ago. Like, I've kicked stuff, I've broken TVs, like I've done a lot of stuff because I'm passionate and I'm emotional about my two teams. And if it ever comes a day where Louisville wins another national championship, guarantee you now, I am probably going to get a little emotional, maybe a lot emotional when I hop onto the show, because we'll still be doing it hopefully by then. I just want to clarify that and get that out of the way. But as far as Kentucky goes, I have a lot of thoughts, a lot of questions, but I mentioned how his first 7 years were incredible. He had, after 2016, he had that Malik Monk De'Aaron Fox year, got beat by a game winner by Luke May, probably should have won that game, probably would have went on. Obviously would have went to the Final Four, maybe could have won the national championship. Had to go through Villanova to do so, but you definitely made the Final Four if that shot didn't go in, I believe, because it would have went in overtime. And then 2017, a couple years after that, Tyler Hero comes in. You guys have a good year, get back to the Elite Eight, lose to a red-hot Auburn squad. 2019, you had a pretty good year. I forgot who you had on that team.
It was the COVID year, the next year, 2019, 2020, yeah.
After COVID hit, before COVID hit, y'all had a really good squad. You had Tyrese Maxey, you had Ashton Hagans, you had Emmanuel Quickly, Nick Richards. I think Reed Travis was on that team. Or
No,
Nate
he was on the
it was Nate Sestina. He was on that team.
You
had a really good squad. You was one of the top 3, top 4 best teams in the country, one of the favorites to win the title. COVID hits, and like a lot of teams, my team included with Louisville, after COVID hit, it really went downhill for Kentucky's program under Cal. If COVID did not hit, and we completely erase that from the memory, I do believe Kentucky would have got to the Final Four that year. But if COVID did not hit and it didn't just shut everything down, do you still think we'd be sitting here in 2024 and this trajectory of Cal going downhill would still keep being like that if COVID never hit?
I think had the world not stopped, I do agree, and I've said this, and you can go back in the archives because that was like our second year in business, and so it's there for consumption. With 3 guards that were playing out of their mind, and then versatile big men, Nick Richards having an All-American type year. Yeah, I think we get to the Final Four. At the least, we get back to another Elite Eight, and then anything can happen. But I think we get to the Final Four because of those guards. We were a top 10 defensive team or top 15, whatever it was. Offensively, we weren't lighting the nets up, but we could score enough to make it hurt you because you did have Emmanuel Quickly burning the nets up. You did have Tyrese Maxey burning the nets up. And so, yeah, long story short, I think that would have stabilized the program, and these last 3 years would have been a little easier to tolerate had you look back and be like, yeah, well, at least we're in the Final Four. But the past 4 seasons have just been brutal, just brutal. And we're going to get into that. And I think it's a good place to go ahead and start. You talked about, and I wrote this article, back in January after the loss to Gonzaga. And I outlined a lot of this, so we'll touch here real quick. But Cal's run from when he first got to Kentucky, that 2009-2010 team with John Wall, DeMarcus Cousins, all the way up until it was the first wave, all the way up till De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk, as you mentioned, where they get knocked out in the Elite Eight. Really, you could even add the all the way up until 2 years later, as you talked about with Tyler Hero and all them, because he still made an Elite Eight. But that's the last time. And then whatever happened with COVID, Cal never adjusted. The second wave of Calipari never adjusted because when COVID hit, and then the following season, we got added all these COVID years. And then NIL became an important factor. And then the transfer portal, it was a thing, but you still had to sit out a year. You couldn't become immediately eligible. So what happened during that time? Well, college basketball got older again, like it used to be. It went from when Cal was dominating at Kentucky, and I do mean dominating. We were relying on youth because everybody was young. You had the exceptions that were still older, but the youth, the extremely talented youth, was winning out. But once college basketball got the COVID year where guys are 23, 24, 25, and they have fifth, sixth, even seventh years of college basketball, it flipped just like that. And Cal never adjusted. He tried in the last couple of years. He brought in Oscar Tshiebwe, became National Player of the Year. He's brought in older guys like Xavier Wheeler. He's brought in a Davion Mintz from Creighton. He's brought in Antonio Reeves. He's brought in, you talk about Nate Sestina, who'd already graduated from Bucknell, or Reed Travis, who'd already graduated from Stanford. He's tried, but he never went full tilt old, really. Last year was probably the oldest team he had when you had Jacob Toppin and Oscar Tshiebwe and Xavier Wheeler and all those people. Or a couple years ago, Kellen Grady was in the mix. You know what I'm saying? And what did it get us? It got us a first-round exit 2 years ago and a historic loss to St. Peter's. And it got us a second-round exit last year. So Cal said, screw it, I'm going back young this year. And it just being that young, because the mindset of 18, 19-year-olds they just don't buy in like a guy that's been around the program a couple years, that's been in college basketball a couple years. We've seen it all year. These kids, so uber talented, historic offense. They know how to do that in their sleep. And we can talk about a deeper discussion about AAU ball and their role. And Kobe Bryant said it before his passing. He was not the biggest fan of modern day AAU basketball because they don't teach kids fundamentals. They spend too much time playing games. They'd rather play 6, 7, 8 games in a week or weekend and do 1 day of practice. And he thought it was ass backwards. And I've always agreed with Mambo on that. So young kids know how to play offense, but they don't know how to play defense. And if they do, they're not physically, a lot of them not physically mature in their bodies, because who is at 18 or 19? So you see the Houstons and James Madison, who's currently playing, and et cetera, et cetera. These older teams are back to winning. And NIL's keeping a lot of the kids in school now because they don't have to rush off and screw up an NBA future to be a second rounder when they come back and be an All-American. The point being is Cal did not adjust. He's got 1 foot in his old, or in like kind of, he's got not even 1 foot, like a half a foot in the new wave of NIL, getting older, mixed with great young talent. And of course, his old way, Peyton. And I wrote it in that article then, Cal's stubbornness has cost Kentucky for many years now, and it did it again this year. His unwillingness to play our best players, the best lineup, the three-headed monster of Reed Sheppard, Rob Dillingham, Antonio Reeves, the best three-man offense in college basketball. Not of an opinion, by fact. By fact. They played, I think, what was it, like 10, 20 possessions last night against Oakland. They were +8. When at least one of them was off the floor of the three, they were -4 or whatever it was. I might have the ass backwards. But basically, that three-headed lineup in limited possessions was +8 or whatever. And he refused to play him because why? Well, we'll get into it again. But his stubbornness. And Peyton, it's just, Cal, I heard a great line this morning on Kentucky Sports Radio from Matt Jones. And he talked about it. Cal still has a burning desire to win. There's no denying John Calipari wants to win badly. But he wants to do it his own way. He doesn't want to, he would rather lose doing it his way, whether that's right or wrong, than win and have to do it somebody else's suggestion. And that's the problem.
So I understand that point of view. And to an extent, I do think they're right about that, if you agree with that. But also my opinion on Cal, and especially here recently, and I've said it before, and it's been like a wait and see approach. After he won after he won the national title in 2012, he won that title with Anthony Davis, Duran Lamb, Marcus Teague, Terrence Jones, and company. Had a great squad, won the national title, capped it off. It was the 30 for 30 that came out about 3 years before, like 4 or 5 years ago, whatever it was. It was a 30 for 30 that came out called One and Not Done. Really good one. I'll go check it out if I was you. After that happened, he told his wife, okay, now that's over. Now we can move on with our lives. And to me, it sounds like, okay, wait a minute. You just won the national title with Kentucky. And now you're saying that's over with. We ain't got to worry about that anymore. Is the passion not there anymore to continue to win titles at this program, a legendary program, the greatest program of all time? And you mentioned earlier, you can ask Jay Bilas, Seth Greenberg, blah, 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 whoever. Don't ask them. Ask me. I'm a Louisville fan. Why would I be saying this if it wasn't the truth? They are the greatest program of all time. They're top two in every single stat you want to mention. Second in national titles, first all-time wins, second in tournament wins behind North Carolina. And it goes on and on and on for one. Every program that they face, every rivalry they've owned, whether it's Tennessee or Louisville, they have multiple wins. I don't think they have a losing record, against any team in the country, period. It just shows how great this program is. You win that national title in 2012. Is the passion and fire not there to continue to build off that and win more? And you mentioned the fact that he still wants to win, but he wants to do it his way. I'm sorry. He's probably very competitive. I'm just as competitive at anything I do in life, whether it's iRacing, bowling, basketball, whatever it is. I am ultra competitive, and I want to win. But the biggest difference between me and him is, or him and Kobe Bryant, or him and Michael Jordan, whatever it is, they're going to try their asses off to win no matter what. They don't care if they got to do it their way or they got to listen to others. Kobe Bryant said he had to go learn from Michael how to win, and he was okay with that. Michael Jordan said he had to go learn from Bill Russell and Larry Bird and Magic Johnson before he started winning. And these are like some of the most competitive sports athletes of all time. Like, it's okay to ask for help. And he just refuses to do that. And that part drives me insane. I do think he wants to win, but I don't think he wants to win as badly as a lot of people think he does.
And that's a good point. You talked about the one and not done. And it's been a while since I've watched it, but he did say that, and that's a good point. And it does make you wonder. I mean, following that release, if I remember right, like, he still had some really competitive teams that we've already talked about. But I mean, what else? Like, we can try to dive into his mindset. And again, in the article I wrote, like, you go back to the undefeated year. Any other coach that it was of his stature would have played Tyler Ulis over Andrew Harrison to win a national championship. He did not. Why? Well, if you know Cal good enough, it's probably because he felt compelled that I had to give the Harrisons every ample opportunity, whether he promised their dad, them, or whatever. If they come back for sophomores, he felt he owed it to them. Well, that's not winning. That's not doing what you can have to do to win games for the program. Like, examples over and over. Like, Ty Washington should have been playing at the point guard spot. Would have gave Kentucky a couple years ago the best opportunity to win a national championship. He refused to do it. He refused to put Kason Wallace last year as the point guard until real late, and he did it very limited time. Why? Probably because he promised Xavier Wheeler that that's his point guard spot, and he felt he needed to ride that out. This year, again, why didn't Reed Shepherd and Rob Dillingham start, especially when it matters? I said it's okay throughout the regular season because it was working, but you needed to start off strong. He didn't do it. Why? If we're being honest, probably he did not want to offend and hurt DJ Wagner's pro prospects. And that's just the reality of it, because he has that connection with DeJuan. So he has these personal, you hear fans for years now during this run of bad luck and postseason play say Cal cares so much about his NBA draft prospects, and all he cares about is getting his guys the NBA contracts and drafted and all this stuff. I mean, there is some validity to that if you just look to base upon his stubbornness and his unwillingness. Like, he's not doing what he used to do. And I heard Seth Greenberg with Stephen A. Smith today on, I think it was First Take or whatever that show is. And Seth Greenberg said that Cal needs to give up swaggy Cal, throw that shit away, and get back to old school John Calipari, where you're coming in, everybody's working hard, we're being tough, we're playing defense. If you're not playing well, you're setting the bench, you will play hard, and it does not matter who you are. He's so worried now about being political Cal and quote unquote swaggy Cal that he doesn't win games. Peyton, if you need proof in the pudding, the University of Kentucky job, we've said this, is the best, but the most hardest to be successful at if you aren't well equipped for it, because it is a fishbowl with nonstop love and adulation from BBN, but if you're sucking it up, nonstop pressure and heat. In his last 10 postseason games, Kentucky that being, in the last 10, that's a SEC tournament, NCAA tournament, they are 2-8. Do you know how many of those 10 games they were favored in?
Probably all of them.
All 10.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
They were favored in all 10 games, and they lost 8 of them. We talked about it. Their SEC tournament record has been atrocious the last few years. Now NCAA tournament record. In the last 5 games, they're 1-4. Tubby Smith, beloved by BBN, beloved, got ran out of town for far less, has the same amount of national championships. He doesn't have the same amount of Final Fours, but he always made the tournament. How many times has John Calipari now at Kentucky missed the NCAA tournament?
Twice.
Not counting COVID, twice.
Yeah.
How many did, we've talked about that, I get back in that article. The worst in the last 4 years, the worst regular season in Kentucky history, going 9-15 in a shortened post-COVID year. The worst 2 losses in NCAA tournament history now. St. Peter's 2 years ago and now Oakland. I mean, it's setting negative records left and right. And again, you want to talk about Tubby Smith. He got beloved, great character man, tremendous coach, Hall of Fame coach, got ran out of Lexington with a sign in his front yard by deranged fans that put for sale signs up in his yard because his final year there, he went 22-12. That included a win in the first round as an 8-9 seed over Villanova, and they played Kansas in the next round and lost by 12 to the 1 seed Kansas. They lost to freaking Kansas after beating Villanova, and they ran Tubby Smith out of town because he went 12-22. In 2006, they went 22-13, beat UAB, lost to Connecticut in the second round, and they were in that game the whole way. Rajon Rondo went nuts. 2005, 28-6. They were beating the Elite Eight and double overtime by Michigan State in an incredible game where Patrick Sparks hits a 3 to tie it up, send it overtime. Incredible game. So 3 or 2 years before Tubby Smith got fired, they were 28-6 and a 2 seed, and they made it to the Elite Eight. And they ran Tubby Smith out of town, somebody who had won a national championship in his first freaking year, who won and dominated in the SEC tournament, who had an overall record in the SEC tournament of something like 19-5, who never not made the NCAA tournament. And they ran him out of town because his recruiting dipped and it looked like things had stalled out. That's the expectations at the University of Kentucky. And Cal, in his own book that he wrote, whatever it was, like 10 years ago, said in regards to Billy Gillispie and Tubby Smith prior to him, the lack of success in the postseason is not acceptable for this position. What has he done now? He is doing the exact same thing that he wrote about in his own book regarding this. 1-4 in the last 5 NCAA tournament games. 1-4 in the last 5 SEC tournament games. They are 2-8 in the last 10 postseason games. So if he thinks that's unacceptable for Tubby Smith and Billy Clyde Gillispie, then what the hell, Cal? Look in the mirror. Look in the mirror and tell me that that's acceptable, because it's not. And you talk about gold standard for, yes, a long, long time. And historically, yes. And for a long tenure of years, there's no doubt the gold standard, because we're winning SEC championships. We're winning SEC tournaments. We're making Final Fours. We're winning a national title. We're getting these high-level recruits. We're putting them in the NBA. That is the Drake's come to your concerts. LeBron James has shown up to practice facility. That's the gold standard. If you still think this is the gold standard, I got news for you. It ain't. You know who the gold standard is? since we've taken a step off, Peyton's wearing them on their shirt. Kansas is the gold standard now. And that's the unfortunate reality of it. So don't give me this gold standard bullshit. Historically, yes, and we should be all the time. But the reality is, the last 4 years has built up so much negative will that we're not the gold standard. Peyton, I know I said a lot, but
yeah, I have a couple questions. For one, obviously, I was going to save that for after the tournament's over because I'm very superstitious and I don't want Kansas to lose the next game because they almost lost the first round game to Stanford. But I do think Kansas, as of now, is 100%. It's got to be the gold standard of college basketball. Like, you can't go 1-5 in NCAA tournament games, having your last 3 tournament appearances. You won 1 game and got bounced out the first round to a 15 seed in St. Peter's and a 14 seed in Oakland, and then you lost to Kansas State in the second round. That's the only tournament game that you won the last 4 years. That's unacceptable. You're not the gold standard anymore, and I'm sorry for BBN for saying that, but it's the truth, and that's the reality of the situation. A couple of stats. You've already kind of mentioned it. They're like 2-8 in postseason play. They're 1-5 in NCAA tournament appearance or tournament games that they've won. They're 1-5 in SEC tournament games. They're also 1-5 in the Champions Classic games, by the way. Since 2018 to 2024, they've won 1 Champions Classic game, and that was the COVID year, or before the COVID year, when they had Tyrese Maxey and that really good group, and they beat Michigan State in that first game. But that's the last time that they've won a Champions Classic game. So I just want to throw that out there as well. That's a stat. As far as other stats goes, Kentucky head coaches, shout out to Corey Price for this. Kentucky head coaches records in the last 126 games at the school. Rick Pitino has the highest percentage. He's only lost 60. He lost 16 games in that 126 game stretch, 87%. John Calipari is dead last with a 63% winning record, 80 wins, 46 losses.
Unacceptable.
That is unacceptable.
Reed Tubby's last 126 that he got ran out of town for.
Tubby's is 91 wins and 35 losses, 72%.
He had 11 more wins at this point in the last 126 games as the coach of Kentucky than Cal, and Tubby got ran out of Lexington.
Yeah. But I do got 2 questions for you. I stayed up to like 4 a.m. After the first night of the March Madness started and after this game was over, because I watched KSR, I watched Sleepers Media, I watched basically anything I could watch about this Kentucky game because I want to just see what everybody was thinking. Kentucky fans, obviously, and just people in the media. I just want to hear their thoughts and what they had to say. And I watched the press conference with Coach Cal, and people asked him, a couple of media guys asked him, like, are you going to change your system? Are you going to change how you're going to build your roster? Like, you went young this year. Young teams don't win national championships. They don't have success in the tournament. Ask Alabama last year because they were very young, had very good regular seasons, was the number 1 overall seed. They ended up getting bounced to the Sweet 16 because of their inexperience. Experience wins national titles, and it has since like 2019. Experience has won national titles. You can't win with freshmen anymore like you've done in 2012. That shit is over with. And they basically asked him, are you going to adjust? He basically said, and I can't quote it intentionally, but I
know what you're going to say.
Subpart thoughts. He basically said, like, it's hard for me to go away from helping these young kids out, these young 18-year-olds out, and then doing like the transfer portal and all that stuff. And here's my question. One question. I got another one after this, but I want you to answer this one. What's the difference between helping an 18-year-old kid and a 22-year-old kid? Don't you want to help them regardless if they're on how old they are? Like, how's that the thought process on that makes no sense to me.
There's no difference. And actually, shout out Jeff Goodman. He said the same thing last night on Field of 68 when asked about that, or brought it up. And he said, what's the difference in helping an 18, 19-year-old and a 20-year-old? Aren't you still helping kids? And he's right, 100% right. that line's so egregious. Like, do you now think that, well, if we get these transfer portal kids or maybe a junior that's like 21 years old, that they're not like technically, even though they're adult, like you still don't mature. You know what I'm saying? Like fully as an adult, you'll hear some people wiser that'll tell you like, oh, just because you're 20 years old don't mean you're an adult, which they're right in a lot of ways. Yeah, that's stupid. It's just him trying to invalidate reasons why he don't want to get older. He wants to continue to pump out all these, high-level McDonald's All-Americans, and I got him these contracts. I think the reality of it is, if we're being honest, maybe a little deeper, if he brings in older guys, think about what the NBA is a lot of times. They want to go off youth and potential. Well, they look at a lot of times, like, let's say for whatever reason, he would have brought in RJ Davis this year. RJ Davis was a damn good point guard, All-American, right? Let's just pretend. RJ Davis will probably get drafted. He should get drafted. But there's always that risk that the NBA is like, yeah, I mean, he's like 22, and there's probably a reason he's still in college, and Cal can't pump his ego to say, like, hey, I developed this kid. He's in the NBA. Look at all the money he's making. You know what I'm saying? And I think there is some of that too, that where he can't, like, if he brings in these older guys who maybe are not the most draft sexy guys, that it'll hurt kind of his ego of, yeah, look at all the guys we put in the league. And I just think that's a bullshit line. I think it's bullshit. And yeah, what's the difference in helping an 18-year-old and helping a 22-year-old? I mean, if you're this big and helping families that are in need, it came up in bad spots to achieve their dreams, then you should want to help anybody, regardless who the hell it is. To help a 24-year-old. Who gives a shit? There's no difference, and I think that was a bullshit answer.
So I do have a counter to that point you just made about how the NBAs go off potential. Shout out to LeBron James and shout out to JJ Redick. They just started a show on YouTube. I forgot what the name of it is, but it's literally just a basketball show where they just sit down, have some wine, and just talk about basketball. And it's a really good show. I'd go check it out on YouTube. In episode 1, LeBron James brought this point up, and he says NBA, when they're doing draft, with all these NBA teams draft, they draft off potential. Like, you want the guy with the most potential on your roster. But if you look at all the championship contender teams, all those guys, there's not really any lottery pick on their roster.
Yeah, they're veterans.
They're veterans. Like, they're guys who was drafted like late first rounds, sometimes early second rounds, and even late second rounds. Like, they're not like lottery picks on these championship rosters. So potential is definitely important. But
we're saying the same thing, though. Like, you're giving like a bonus point to what I was saying, though. Like, they run that risk, though, if they're not like a lottery pick where he can't pump it out. Be like, look at my first rounder. Look at this is like my 49th first rounder. I think there's some of that in play. You were giving stats. How about this? Shout out Chris Fisher from Chris Fisher 24/7. John Calipari before his lifetime contract. We talked about the dominance. 305-71 with an 81 win percentage. 23-4 in SEC tournament, 31-8 NCAA tournament. That's gold standard. That's gold standard shit right there. John Calipari since lifetime contract. 105-52, a 66, basically rounded up 67 win percentage. 1-4 in SEC tournament, 1-3 in the NCAA tournament. That lifetime contract's bullshit, and that's what leads us to the next point. Where do we go? Oh, last thing on Cal too about his stubbornness and lack of development of certain talent and stuff. Like, look at that Oakland game. Everybody in the world, everybody, even the commoners on Twitter that don't watch college basketball and cover it like we do, knew Oakland ran a zone. Kentucky came into that game. Kentucky came into that game looking like they were shocked, absolutely shocked that these guys were in a zone, and that is ill prepared. And it's not just the Oakland game in a bubble. You go back through the history. How many times did we get beat on out of bounds underneath? Or how many times scouting report wise did they not trail shooters and tag them? And he's not putting his guys. And you can say, and there is some validity to that. Sometimes guys just get out there and don't follow scouting reports. I can fully understand being a coach myself that happens, right? But if it happens consistently, who does that fall on? That is the job of the head coach. That is ill-prepared teams. That is ill-prepared players. And if you have a player or two or three that continually do it, You may not like Bob Knight and his style, but the damn dude was a magician of a head coach. And that old style, as much as you can say it's out of date, and he is right on this. Fear is a hell of a motivator. Sometimes you got to know the mentality of your players. Some need love, where you pat them on the back and you tell them, hey, man, it's all right. You're good. Some need that you get up in their face and tell them, if you don't stop turning the fucking ball over, if you don't stop misreading, not listening to the scouting report, if you don't stop giving up offensive rebounds, you are sitting on the bench. I don't care. Roy Williams, Hall of Famer, used to get so pissed off at his legendary starting fives with Tyler Hansborough and Ed Davis and all these dudes. He would sub them out in big-time games 5 at a time, keep them on the bench, play the bench guys to get a message across. Cal doesn't do it because he doesn't want to hurt egos. And it's bullshit coaching. It is bullshit is what it is. It is hurting not only the players, the long term, it is hurting the fan base who drives this machine. And it is bullshit, pussy ass coaching. Excuse the language, but you can tell I'm fired up.
2 thoughts, and we can move on to contract stuff and then the future of Kentucky's basketball
we're at 40
program.
minutes now.
Yes, 2 quick thoughts on the whole coming out, the lack of preparation and the bullshit coaching of Cal. Cal and Campy has had a history together, and even if they didn't, Campy has been at Oakland for 40 fucking seasons. He has not changed his system once at all. That should be like an easy scout day. You know what they're going to do. That's just a lack of preparation. And honestly, I'm tired of the excuses with Cal because it's every fucking game that they lose. Oh, you can put this blame on me. Or now he threw the players under the bus in his interview, and it's ridiculous. Kiss my ass, Cal. That's ridiculous. Last thought.
Real quick, too. If you had a player that you knew had came in, he has one weapon to beat you. He shoots threes. He's taken 8 2-point shots all year.
Yeah.
He's taken over 350 3-point shots, and he's capable of making, like he did, 10 of them, Jack Golke. If the first time that he's let's say he hits 4 of them one game, and you got guys flying by and not staying tagged to him, and the person who's on top of the screen not checking him off and all that stuff. Peyton, if I was your coach, and I have coached you, what would I say to the whole team? And especially the person, if that was you guarding, would I not get up in your face and be like, if you don't stay on this motherfucker and run him off the 3-point line, you are not playing.
Yep, exactly. And last thought, in the last 3 years under Cal, he's had the National Player of the Year, the National Freshman of the Year, and he had a guy in Antonio Reeves who broke the record under the Cal era of points per game in Antonio Reeves. 3 years, 1 tournament game that they've won.
Yeah.
Come on. Something's got to change.
It's crazy. But let's start winding this down. And I know what you're going to ask. So where do we go from here? When we talk about this divorce, it's time. And I know the big issue is buyout because of the lifetime contract Mitch Barnhart signed him to, right? And that was out of fear. If you hear people around the inside program, UCLA kind of was knocking at the door following, I think it was 2016, 17, or right around that time, potentially going to take him. Cal was at the height of his power still. And so, of course, we didn't want to lose him, and Mitch signed him to a lifetime contract. All right. Terrible deal in long term. You never give anybody a lifetime contract, but that's where we're at. So it's down to $33 million, right? A couple of years ago, it was at like 80, but it's down to 33. That's still a lot of money. If this was football and SEC, it'd be done in a heartbeat. But it's a lot of money. And people could say, well, Kentucky's got rich donors. Well, if you listen to people close to the program, Matt Jones, again, broke it down wonderfully. You go back and listen to KSR podcasts here in the last day or two alone, he'll explain it to you. The big donors like Joe and Kelly Kraft, who are mega donors, used to be all basketball, no football. And Cal, at the beginning, had relationships with the donors. He would travel around the country with them. And he had a relationship with the media. He had a relationship with people in the program. Him and Mitch Barnhart had a relationship. But you hear him now, he has no connection to the donors. He cut off the local media. He cut off Mitch Barnhart. Him and the AD do not have a relationship. And so Joe and Kelly Kraft, those big donors, switched football. They're hanging out with Mark Stoops. So if Mark Stoops went to practice facility, they're going to pony up. So why would donors want to pay a guy that maybe they don't like now to go away? So it's not just as easy as like giving like, we can raise 33 million. But if Andy Staples, shout out Andy Staples from On3, he does a lot of SEC football, but he does talk SEC basketball, and he's really great with these buyouts and contracts. And he broke it down today on one of his videos. It was actually from last night, but I watched it today. And there's loopholes. Like if you look at Jimbo Fisher, Texas A&M, between two donors, basically ponied up like 70 some million or whatever to buy him out, to tell him to go the hell away because they were tired of it. Well, he had to do that because in his contract, he was getting paid all of his money up front. Cal doesn't have those protections in this buyout where he's basically has to get the full 33, 35 million or whatever it is. There's ways around it. Now, like, let's say he leaves for another job. And let's say, hypothetically, he goes to Michigan because it's open. And that's an attractive job, right? It's an attractive job. Let's say he goes there and gets like $9 million a year. Well, that comes off. Like Kentucky doesn't pay that because in the contract that like offsets the cost. So that's one way of getting this buyout, this contract lower. And another way is annual installments. Like you could pay him like $3 million a year as long as he got paid every month on the month for, and it equaled whatever, like $3 million a year for the lifetime of the contract, or like $6 million a year, whatever the case may be. Basically make payment installments to him. Well, then it becomes a lot cheaper and probably a little bit more affordable to get him the hell out to bring a new coach in. So Peyton, I know what you're going to ask. Where does Cal go if this divorce happens and we can buy him out? Well, actually, the first thing should be, what should happen? I think Mitch Barnhart needs to sit down with Cal if it hasn't already happened, get him in a room, lock those two in a room together and say, listen, we know this ain't going to work. Like the fan base is like, this is awkward at this point. What's he going to do? He's talking about, well, I've got a great group coming in next year. Nobody wants to hear that in BBN. For a long time, you fooled us, and because we could look at it and be like, oh yeah, man, we got the number one class coming in. Maybe things will be all right. We're done. You can't fool us no more. You cannot fool us with these classes. We don't give a shit. So we're not buying it. A lot of the fan base, even the diehard Cal supporters, want you going. So it's an awkward deal. And again, back to the divorce thing. It's like a couple that's been together for 10 plus years and everything was great. But then things started getting bad. You hit in a rocky time in a relationship. And then it's to the point where there's some hard times. And now it's to the point where you live in the same house, you're married, but there's no feelings anymore. And it's starting to turn to animosity where you sit at the kitchen table and don't talk. That's kind of where we're at with John Calipari. And so Mitch Barnhart needs to sit with Cal in a room and just tell him, like, man, if you came back next year, it's going to be so uncomfortable for everybody, for the fan base, for me, and I know for you. So let's figure out a way to get this buyout down. Let's maybe like 25 million off the top. We can come up with that. You take this, you go to a new job, you're happier. We get to move on, we're happier. And that way you can still be a legend, because if he leaves now and he does it on his own kind of volition, people in a couple years, like 5-10 years down the road, they'll welcome him back with open arms. They'll put his name in the rafters, everything. But if he fights this to get all of his money and stays, and we continue to go down this path of not looking like Kentucky basketball, they'll want to burn his house with him in it, figuratively. Not literally. I'm not promoting violence. I'm just saying, like, figuratively. So let's do it. End on amicable terms. You move on, take Michigan, take SMU, take whatever, take a year off, go back to the NBA, whatever the hell you want to do. And let us bring somebody in. And let's course correct this and get back to Kentucky basketball.
I think it's very important because I mentioned it after the game was over. I posted about it on Facebook. I did a live video right after this game talking about it. And I'm like, there is no chance in hell that Mitch Barnhart can come up with any type of reasoning to bring Coach John Calipari back for another year after this. The fan base is done. They've already started to climb up to this situation, to this Cal being fired crap for like a couple years now, really since the St. Peter's game. And it's gotten worse, and now it's at the pinnacle, and there is nothing you're going to do. Unless if you win a national championship, there is nothing you're going to be able to do to win this fan base back besides leave and let them move on, because it's time to move on.
Put it like this, and I think it was our friend Matt Sack that said this, and if not, whoever's credit, I'm sorry. But what happens? Let's say this great class, he stays. He doesn't want to leave. Whatever, we can't make him leave. The money issue. He comes back with this great class. Well, then BBN is going to be hostile. And even if we have a great regular season where we go like 29-4, win the SEC tournament, nobody's going to really care. They'll be happy. But you know what everybody's going to be thinking about? As soon as we hit the NCAA tournament, it's going to be like nervous. It's going to be like, oh shit, are we gonna drop this again? Nobody wants to live like that. Nobody in a committed relationship wants to live with the constant fear of like, yeah, it's okay now, but we got it in the back of our mind because history tells us that, well, this might go wrong. No, nobody wants to live like that. So it's time.
And if he stays, it's getting to the point, like the list of like A+ home run hires is slowly starting to dwindle down. And if you're Kentucky, moving on from Cal, you said it before, you better get someone who's just as good as him, or it's not going to be worth it. There's not a lot of great A+ hires right now, but let's go ahead and get into that, Josh. If they fire Cal, like they probably should, or find a way to get him out, he's not coaching next year. He coaches last game in the NCAA Tournament round 64 game against Oakland in Pittsburgh. Who do they go after? Who's the next guy to replace John Calipari?
So I actually think if this would have happened even a couple years ago, it would have been much harder. But in today's world of NIL, Kentucky's got NIL, especially with this new kind of La Familia deal where fans can pump in. There's NIL. The name brand Kentucky and the transfer portal being number one. It's easier than ever to flip a roster overnight. And make no mistakes, when Cal leaves, that number recruiting class of Boogie Flan and Jaden Quaintus and all these kids, they're going with him. So we won't have that. And a lot of the guys on the roster that may have came back, like an Aaron Bradshaw and Justin Edwards, whoever, they're gone. So we got to understand that. We're starting from scratch. But if you get a guy, I think my number one would be Bruce Pearl. Because you talk about a guy that would fit with Kentucky. Like always takes his opportunity to put over Kentucky, a guy who can recruit. You don't think Bruce Pearl at Kentucky could look at the rosters with limited basketball history at Auburn? Look what he's done. He's won 2 SEC tournament championships in the last 3 years. I know they got upset today, but upsets happen. He is a likable guy to some. He's hateable, so he kind of fits that. He would love Kentucky's fan base. And you talk about X's and O's, like X's and O's, Peyton, Bruce Pearl's phenomenal. Your teams are going to play hard. They're going to score. They're going to be athletic. He could go into the transfer portal and late recruiting and flip Kentucky's roster in the summer, and they will be back in contention again next year. And he would be the type that go around the state on the tour bus, shaking hands, kissing babies, signing autographs. He would love it. Bruce Pearl's my number one right now, I think. And so, yeah, I think you go Bruce Pearl. I think, if you did get like a Dusty May, that's a little trickier. He's a great coach, but how would he fit in that fishbowl? But I think you swing for a home run, too. I think you go Dan Hurley. I think you swing for Dan Hurley. Look what he's doing at UConn. Now, maybe his personality, because he's fiery, doesn't fit with the fishbowl at Kentucky, but we know damn well he's a hell of a coach and he's a hell of a recruiter. He would fit at Kentucky from that aspect. So I think you swing on Dan Hurley. Nate Oates, maybe. Nate Oates would recruit, good in-game coach. Would he fit the fishbowl? I don't know, but it would still be a good hire. I think you swing for the fence with Billy Donovan. I think he may get let go from the Bulls. Bring Billy the kid back, and see if he's still got some magic in that coaching body for college. I think you swing for the fences, but I think a legitimate, reasonable hire, and I think he would jump at the opportunity. Sorry, Auburn fans. I think Bruce Pearl would fit like a hand in a glove, and Kentucky would not have really any drop-off from this year to next and probably a coaching advantage being better at that. I think Bruce Pearl would be the guy right now that's realistically that would make sense.
I love Bruce. I've always been a fan of Bruce and his personality. He's a hell of a coach. He's been to the Final Four. He's won 2 SEC tournament championship games, and hell, I picked him to win the national title this year, and they ended up getting upset by Yale on the first round NCAA tournament, which, like you mentioned, upsets happen. It happens all the time. Dan Hurley was the name that I was going to bring up, and that's the only job I think he'd leave UConn for right now is Kentucky, because the NIL is so freaking good. The fan base is obviously passionate. His personality, I do think, fits because, like you mentioned, he has a fiery personality, but guess what? So was John Calipari, and so was Rick Pitino. So it's not something they're not used to before. He can recruit. He's going to get some of the best transfers in the country in. He's going to coach them up. His system that he runs is fun. They play hard-nosed basketball, and especially if they win the national championship this year, like I think they're going to do, and be the first team since Florida to go back-to-back. You ride that sunset, you ride that momentum, you go right towards Lexington, Kentucky, and the fan base is right there bowing down to your knees as soon as you walk into Lexington. That's Rupp Arena is going to be back. He is going to do amazing things there, and that's actually my number 1 pick.
Yeah, I would take Hurley. And some of the other names I've seen floated around, like obviously Tommy Lloyd's a good recruiter. He's doing a hell of a job at Arizona, but his personality doesn't fit what you need at Kentucky.
And I think he's proved it.
No, and I think he would get eaten alive at Kentucky because it is so hard, Peyton. It is like the New York Yankees. I think it's like the Lakers or Boston Celtics. It's the Yankees. It's Real Madrid. You have to come in and win. But you also have to win the game off the court or off the field with the fans. You have to win at all costs. And when you do, Big Blue Nation is behind you, and there's a reason it's the best job in the damn sport. It is. You can say whatever you want. Kentucky's the best job for all the reasons we've laid out. So I don't know if Tommy Lloyd would fit. I don't know if even Mark Few would fit because you have to have that kind of that personality that can handle all this. When it goes good, it's amazing. But when it goes bad, can you kind of rewrite the course? And again, I think Bruce Pearl's a great one. I think Dan Hurley's a good one. I think Billy Donovan would be fine with that. But whoever it is, you got to get somebody that can do it all. And Kentucky will. I have faith in them. I have faith. There's always that risk you run. But I have faith. But Peyton, the point of this, and we went longer than what I thought, but there's a lot to cover and explain. The time has come for John Calipari to move on from the University of Kentucky, or better yet, it is time for the University of Kentucky and Big Blue Nation to say adieu to, or no, I didn't really say my friendship, but to say goodbye to John Calipari. And it's time for this divorce to become final. Like Cal will go to Michigan. He'll do great things up in Michigan. Not nearly as much pressure because football is king. He'll do good things at SMU or wherever he goes because I'm sure he'll still want to coach and he'll have a fire back in his belly. But it's time for Kentucky to become the gold standard again. And I just don't think when John Calipari on the sidelines at 65 years old that that's going to happen anymore.